House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi had a town hall on CNN a few weeks ago that she and pundit Jake Tapper thought was going to end with a very light question. But Trevor Hill, a leftist student from NYU, sort of threw her for a loop and went off script. So let's take a look at what he had to say, and I'll interrupt myself as there needs to be things that need to be broken down. So, apologies for some freezing in the video. This was the only way I could find the entire clip, because CNN's edit of it kind of sucks. So let's take a look and break it down as we go along.
This is what we call in this business a soft landing. It is a lighter question from our friend Trevor Hill.
Again, this was the plan. Don't challenge people in power too much, and don't encourage too much original thought. We wouldn't want that on television.
Student at NYU. He's from San Diego. Trevor.
Good evening.
Thank you for your question. Sorry to interrupt.
Good evening, Congresswoman. Thank you for being here, and thank you for taking my question. I was originally slated to ask a pretty soft question, but given the dire circumstances, I'm so sorry, Mr. Tapper.
That was a lighthearted but I'm pretty sure there was at least some part of him that was like, oh God, what's he going to say? This wasn't the plan.
Given the dire circumstances our country is in, I wonder if you'd indulge me in a little bit more of a serious question about the future of the Democratic Party. What I've seen on NYU's campus and what I've seen in polls all over, I mean, CNN even, a Harvard University poll last May showed that people between the ages of 18 and 29, not just Democrats, not just leftists, 51% of people between 18 and 29 no longer support the system of capitalism. And that's not me asking you to make a...
As you can see, she's visibly thrown by that question. She's visibly thrown by someone asking her to think critically about capitalism. And I think she's even somewhat scared of radical young people. Now, a little bit of context for that kind of poll. I don't necessarily think this was 51% of 18 to 29-year-olds declaring themselves revolutionary socialists. But there is growing skepticism of capitalism, and in that sense this is a positive development. But not in the minds of Democratic politicians whose job it is to preserve capitalism, as you'll see in her very defensive answer here.
Radical statement about capitalism, but I'm just telling you that my experience is that the younger generation is moving left on economic issues, and I've been so excited to see how Democrats have moved left on social issues. As a gay man, I've been very proud to see you fighting for our rights, and for many Democratic leaders fighting for our rights. But I wonder if there's anywhere you feel that the Democrats could move farther left to a more populist message, the way the alt-right has sort of captured this populist strain on the right wing, if you think we could make a more stark contrast to right-wing economics.
You got that? The question is, what can Democrats do to position themselves as more starkly different economically from the Republicans? What can the Democrats do to move further left on economic issues? Very straightforward question. Keep it in mind, because she's about to totally ignore it.
Well, I thank you for your question, but I have to say we're capitalist, and that's just the way it is.
Any doubt that the Democratic Party upholds the capitalist system should be laid to rest right there. Of course, there will be still some right-wingers who think the Democratic Party is a socialist party, who think they want the government to control everything, even though that's not remotely the same thing as socialism, who think that the Democrats are their threat to freedom as how they define it, meaning they're a threat to capitalism. But it's their job to uphold capitalism, and it's their job to be a sparring partner for Republicans. Because when it comes right down to it, the Democrats would rather lose to a Republican than lose to a party that's further to the left of them. Losing to an anti-establishment party or an anti-establishment candidate someone who is actually skeptical of capitalism would be a bigger blow to their power than losing to a Republican. They're comfortable with Donald Trump. They can oppose Donald Trump on their terms. But they can't oppose capitalism because it's not in their internal structure to do so. It is not in their job function to do so. The system that got them here is capitalism, and they intend to protect it at all costs, even if it lets fascist sympathizers and perhaps actual fascists rise to power. That's what they're comfortable with.
Stakeholder capitalism. Capitalism that said when we make decisions as managements and CEOs of the country, we take into consideration our shareholders, our management, our workers, our customers, and the community at large.
And they, the managers and the CEOs of a country, get to determine what that is. They and they alone only bestow the wisdom of what it means to run a community, run a business. The workers have no say themselves. We have to trust the benevolent CEOs to determine what is best for the lowly working class. They are benevolent, and they know what is best. Everyone holds a stake in it, but the management and the CEO know what's best because this is a capitalist system, and you have to trust your masters in providing what's best for their slaves.
At that time, the disparity between the CEO and the worker was about 40 times more for the CEO than the worker.
For clarification, in between, that's where there was a break in the audio. She's referring to the 1980s, and she's referring to the Standard Oil chairman in New Jersey. That's what she's referring to.
As productivity rose, the pay of the worker rose, and the pay of the CEO rose. Everything rose together.
And of course, because CEOs exist, their function is to take way more than they produce for a theft that's referred to as profit.
Around 20 years ago, it started to turn into, maybe 20 years ago, it started to turn into shareholder capitalism. We're strictly talking about the quarterly report.
I'm kind of sick of liberals just hyphenating capitalism at any chance they get. Because capitalism obviously can't be the problem. Capitalism is what we have. And what we have is, by definition, good. Don't change too much of what we have. But capitalism is the fundamental problem. Why did it turn into shareholder capitalism? Because capitalism. That's why it turned into shareholder capitalism. Because shareholder capitalism and stakeholder capitalism are both capitalism, and they're both susceptible to massive inequality, which is a natural state. But Pelosi treats this as a spontaneous difference, a spontaneous aberration in the pattern, deviation from the norm, as opposed to a natural state. And even if she did admit that it was a natural state, she would still find it acceptable, because that's just the way it is.
So a CEO would make much more money by keeping pay low, even though productivity is rising, the worker's not getting any more pay, and the CEO's getting a big pay because he's kept costs low by depriving workers of their share of the productivity that they created.
Yes, that's exactly how capitalism works. You own property, and you pay workers to work for you using that property, and pay them as little as possible so that you can make as much money as possible while still staying in business as long as possible and as largely as possible, and grow and grow and grow for its own sake while paying your workers as little as you possibly can. Pelosi admitted it here. Workers create all productivity, but they don't get the entirety of the productivity. Now, she won't draw the conclusion that the only way for workers to get the entirety of their productivity would be for them to own the means of production, i.e. socialism. but she doesn't need to. Trevor Hill already knows that. I'm sure part of him just wanted to see Pelosi squirm and try to defend capitalism at all costs to dispel any notions that the Democratic Party defends capitalism, to dispel any notions that it is not their job to maintain capitalism in as orderly a way as possible.
And as I call it, a right angle going in the wrong direction.
No, Nancy. Capitalism is not broken. It's working entirely as it's intended to work. There will be exasperation of the social order, and there will be people who bring the social order back down. But as long as capitalism exists, there will be theft of wages and theft of productivity, because that is the nature of the system. You find it acceptable, many people, including myself and including Trevor Hill, and including some of the people in that 51% of millennials who don't support capitalism, do not find it acceptable. Capitalism works by private owners depriving the fruits of productivity from the workers who actually create it. That is capitalism to its core. And unless you were to completely abolish it, that's going to continue. It is an inevitable cycle.
The disparity between the CEO and the worker under the shareholder capitalism.
Under capitalism, the disease you are trying to name is capitalism. You think that if someone has cancer, they really care immediately what kind of cancer it is? No, because if something's not done about the cancer, they are going to die. What's important is that they have cancer, and it needs to be taken care of in however many ways it can be taken care of. Capitalism, in this analogy, is cancer. It grows, and it feeds off cells in the body of the world, but it continues to exist. Capitalism, in this analogy, is a tumor, and you don't need to specify what kind of tumor something is to make it sound as bad when what you're trying to do is get rid of the whole fucking thing. But you're not trying to get rid of the whole fucking thing, you are trying to keep a smaller tumor in the world's body. That's not enough! Cancer has to go. Capitalism has to die.
Is more like 350 to 400 to 1.
As long as capitalism exists, the CEO to average worker pay rate is going to get worse. Just like as long as a tumor exists, you can make it smaller sometimes, but unless you can actually make it go away, either by shrinking it or totally removing it, before it spreads, it won't go away. The tumor will still be in the body. Capitalism will still exist as long as capitalism exists. And capitalism existing is a bad thing for the world at large. Just like cancer existing in any form is a bad thing for the human body.
From 40 to 1 to 350 to 400 to 1.
Do the workers own the means of production? No? Then you're not attacking the correct problem.
That income inequality is an immorality.
And an inevitable consequence of capitalism. Not shareholder capitalism, not stakeholder capitalism, not crony capitalism, not unregulated capitalism, not unfettered capitalism, capitalism. That is the problem, is capitalism.
And it is not even smart from an economic standpoint because it doesn't grow the economy. The more money you put in the pocket of the worker for the productivity he or she has produced,
which, as long as capitalism exists, they're going to receive less than what they actually produce because capitalism exists.
The more money they will spend, consume with confidence, inject into the economy and grow the economy. So
The capitalist economy, Pelosi's right, demand-side economics are good for maintaining the capitalist system, but maintaining the capitalist system is fundamentally unethical because the workers who create wealth do not get to control the means of production which they themselves are using. But Pelosi takes it as a given that capitalism must exist because it exists now, and it has existed for a long time, so it must therefore be good.
What you talked about and what you talked about, the same thing, the stagnation of wages and the financial instability that families are feeling, tied with seeing priorities that are not necessarily ones that they have as, well, they care about it, but it's not a job, and being able to have a home and send your children to school and have a dignified retirement are what we want for all Americans, and capitalism should serve that purpose.
No, Trevor Hill did not say that capitalism should serve the needs of all people because he knows that it can't.
The capitalist system has been well served by the so-called safety net. It's not just a safety net for individual workers, it's a safety net for capitalism.
Pelosi somehow thinks this is a good admission, that this is a positive development, when she's admitting that despite the beliefs of conservatives and liberals alike, the safety net is not some sort of compromise with the capitalist system to inject some socialism inside it, as if that were even a thing. But the welfare state is used to preserve capitalism, to preserve order. The capitalist class will concede economic power if it will serve their own ends, which is preserving the capitalist system and staving off popular revolt. So when Pelosi says that the welfare state is a safety net for capitalism, she's telling the truth. But unlike socialists, this isn't a good thing in our minds. We know that the welfare state under capitalism is what's keeping it alive. That's the problem. It's still alive.
Because they can go through their cycles, and when they
The boom and bust cycles, which are naturally a consequence of capitalism and will continue to happen as long as capitalism exists, no matter who's in power.
don't need as many employees, we have unemployment insurance or all kinds of benefits as a safety net that enable them to get through cycles.
And Pelosi effectively admits here that it's preferable to have recessions and depressions every now and then if it meant that capitalism would remain in place as the dominant social order. This is vile.
But instead, and there's some enlightened corporations which
Corporations are a capitalist invention. As long as capitalism exists, they're not as enlightened as they need to be.
say, I'm keeping my whole staff.
And I'm going to continue to exploit my staff. But they'll have the illusion of security because they'll keep the job they've been used to.
Through thick and thin, at the end of the day, I have a productive, trained, loyal workforce.
Who I siphon off for the sake of profit.
So we have to change the thinking of people. I don't think we have to change from capitalism. We're a capitalist system. The free market is a place that can do good things.
We're a capitalist system, and capitalism is good because it's good, because it exists. The free market can do good things under capitalism, like making 8 people as rich as half the fucking planet.
Actually, Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, The Invisible Hand, he was more compassionate. He wrote 2 books. His other book was about our responsibilities to each other, as well as Wealth of Nations. I wish he had written 1 book where he incorporated all of it together.
Where he advocated for maintaining the rights of private property at all costs.
Do I hear what you're saying about young people? And may I
No, you don't.
say we have our Eric Swalwell heads up something called our Future Forum, where young members of Congress in their 30s, late 20s, I think some of them have graduated to 30s now, go around the country and listen to young people. Perhaps he can visit you at school as well, but thank you for sharing.
I can't bullshit you very well, so maybe someone else can.
Let's thank Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and all the questioners and everyone else who helped make this town hall possible. A special thanks to our audience, those asking the questions, sharing their stories, their personal stories, also watching around the world. Don Lemon picks it up now. Thanks again, Leader Pelosi. No, I'm fine. Good job. Thank you so much.
Don't let the kid respond. Get off him as soon as possible. Get out of the show. Wrap it up. So in case anyone had any doubts, the nature of the Democratic Party is to preserve capitalism and make it appear as friendly as possible and paint yourselves as a viable alternative to the Republicans. That is the nature of the Democratic Party. That's the function of the Democratic Party. There will never be any serious attempts by the Democratic Party in overthrowing the capitalist system or even making it slightly less powerful than it already is, because as Pelosi explained, the safety net, which Democrats champion, is a safety net not for people, because people will still be dependent, but for capitalism, to preserve capitalism at all costs, even if it meant momentarily giving up your power. The New Deal has been dismantled piece by piece over the decades, and that is because capitalism still exists, because social democracy, what the most ideal Democrats might propose, and that's might, because a lot of them might not even go that far, is unsustainable. But it keeps capitalism in place. And that is the goal for anyone who is inside the Democratic Party, because that's what got them to power. So anytime anyone says to you that the Democratic Party is any threat to the capitalist system, and whoever tries to explain how big of a socialists the Democratic Party and people in it tend to be, show them Nancy Pelosi trying as hard as she can to avoid this question. It's up to the masses to realize their power. They can't look for a savior. They can't look for a politician who promises the world to them. They have to take ownership of the things they create, of the culture they want to have. It's up to us, everybody, and as you plainly saw, politicians won't save you. For Democratize the Media, I'm Jeremy Einbinder. Solidarity. Keep fighting.